Hi.
Hi.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So you're all ready for this morning's presentation?
We think so.
Yeah, they should be. I think these sessions should be fairly short, so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah.
This is only our third one.
How have they been?
The AGM was very, very popular, which I was surprised about, and then Charlotte's presentation last week was also very popular. So that's good. At least we found that this seems to work for people, so that's another way we can provide information.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it was a good discovery coming out of unexpected circumstances.
Yes. So do you want to go in the same order that we've got it on advertised, which I think is with you guys first, then Charlotte, and then Anoushka?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, we're very happy to go first.
Yep.
Will you give us some kind of introduction, or will we introduce ourselves?
I'll give a very brief introduction and just say what's going to happen today in terms of who's presenting, what the topic is, and then pass it over to you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think this is such a small time, we don't want to spend hours introducing ourselves and then you go and introduce yourself again. So
yeah,
I thought I'm just keeping it as simple as possible.
Yes, yes.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
treat it. Access this box.
Oh, which one is it? Fuck. Help me with this headset. I can't seem to get it to go, and I've chosen all the options. So I've got those choices, and then I tried that one, and then I've come over here to check these, chosen both of those.
We'll just give people a few more minutes to join, then we'll start.
It's a headset microphone, right? Headset earphone mic.
What happens if you click on that?
This one?
Yeah.
Nothing. No, just nothing. It's just dead. And I've tried it in the front and in the back.
You might need to mute yourself.
Huh?
You might need to mute yourself just in case people are hearing.
Oh, where's that?
If you click.
Okay, welcome everyone to the third CatSig Talks. I'm Joanne Rowan, the CatSig convener. Today we have got 3 short talks on my right page. One on Maori subject headings from David and Donna, Power of 9 from Charlotte, as well as updates from the National Library by Anoushka. So from what I understand, we're going to go in that order. If anything changes, we'll work it out as we go. I'll now hand you over to Donna and David for their session.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Today we want to share with you how we introduce new Ngā Upoko Tukutuku to our staff here at Unitech. So we're just going to bring up the newsletter that we're using. This is a monthly newsletter, and we've been doing this since the middle of 2017. So we'll move on to an example of today's subject heading. In this case, as you can see, it's Raranga. We start with screenshots of relevant book covers. Hopefully, because this is an internal document, we're not breaking too many copyright restrictions. Then, now we go to the whakapapa of that heading. And as you can see, this is an entry from the Ngā Upoko Tukutuku website at the National Library. So it just gives the definition, scope, and related subject headings. Then, having introduced the heading, we relate it to our collections and resources in both print and digital domains. You can see here, I don't know if it's large enough, we've got relevant Dewey numbers alongside with some associated additional Maori subject headings. For example, Raranga Kete and Piu Piu. Now moving on to the digital domain, you can name whatever resources you want to bring people's attention to. We think this is a great opportunity to highlight our research repository. The Unitech one is called the Research Bank. It's a matter of some pride. Our local practice is to add Maori subject headings throughout, not just for theses, but for articles and oral presentations too. So whenever an item has Maori content, it gets the Maori subject heading. Also, our Research Bank platform has direct access to the National Library thesaurus via a subject table lookup. This makes it easy for the reo curious to apply headings. Next, we go to, where are we? Pronunciation and common definitions. So here's a screenshot from a great resource you probably already know. It's the maoridictionary.co.nz website. This is quite useful because they have audio files attached to the entries, so your users can hear the correct pronunciation. Also, we all know as metadata people that library authorized subject headings can sometimes have a different scope to the everyday meaning. So for the reo fluent, this can help them to understand any differences. Next, we provide hyperlinks. And we've found Te Ara is a good and authoritative website to bring to the attention of your users for more detail and background on your subject. So far, I've covered how our newsletter gives tips on how to navigate resources. Now I'll hand it over to Donna. She has a few words to say about how we use this newsletter to highlight our people and campus.
Kia ora, David. Where we can, we aim to relate the newsletter to our campus and to our people. So as you can see here, we're telling the story of the raranga or the weaving within Unitec's wharenui. So we've started off just quite broadly talking about raranga as the subject heading and how it fits in the catalogue. And now we're bringing in a bit of storytelling to see how that term relates to us. As you can see from this image here, the back wall of our whare is very distinctive and is completely covered in weaving. So we thought this was a really good thing to highlight. The people, there are images of people, you can see there, the faces, and they're actually 3D. And apparently what happened was when the whare was built, there was a collaboration with staff from the boat building department, and they made a fiberglass mould that the raranga was stretched over and steamed or something like that to create the 3D relief. But that whole back wall was woven by only 2 weavers, Judy Hohaya, who's now Judy Robson-Dean, and Shona Tawhaiao. They had similar tension in their weaving, so between them they wove that whole wall, and on that back wall alone there are nearly 28,000 strips of flax used. We then highlighted those 2 artists because they made such a big contribution. Both are well-known weavers. Firstly, Judy Robson-Dean. We put this page in to highlight some of Judy's work, including there's a glass case full of raranga that used to sit in the library that Judy had lent to us to display, and the work of Shona Tawhaiao. You may know the work of these 2 artists. The next thing we highlighted is this piece of raranga that was gifted to Unitec Library by Kahutoi Te Kanawa. And this hangs in the library. And so again, we're telling the story of our space and of people connected with our space. Kahu Te Kanawa comes from a really illustrious whakapapa of weavers. She is the daughter of Digares Te Kanawa and the granddaughter of Dame Rangimarie Hatet. And that links into this next slide, which is about the marae at Unitec. So Te Tahitanga Marae includes 5 components. There are the buildings, there's the wharenui, Ngā Kaumahaki, there's the Whare Kai, which is called Manaakitanga, and Pukenga, which is the Māori Studies building. The other two aspects of the marae are the puna, or the spring, and the pā harekeke, the flax garden, which is used for weaving, and that is named Te Rangi Mārie after Te Rangi Mārie Hetet, who was Kahu, Te Kanawa's grandmother. So we've just woven into this newsletter, relating it to the stories of our people.
Thanks, Donna. So I guess to summarize, such a newsletter as this, it gives you an opportunity to alert everyone not only to Matauranga Māori via subjects and concepts, but also to weave a kōrero about your people and spaces. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I guess I just take over now, or Joanne, do you want to call for questions first? Joanne's gone silent on us. She's muted herself.
Yes, I muted myself and I was talking away here. Thank you for that. Yep, so has anyone got any questions? I've got a few comments and people thinking it was a great resource. But has anyone got any questions they want to ask before we pass on to Charlotte? No? Okay, well, thank you again, David and Donna. At least you can hear me. It was a very interesting presentation, giving me some ideas to think about as well. So I'll now pass over to Charlotte.
You've got a couple of questions come through there.
Yes, I just have. Can you see the questions in the chat, or would you like me to read them?
Yes, we can see them. So there's, have you had feedback from Unitech staff? And
yes,
yes, we have.
In fact, we've had some people say, put us on the mailing list. They found it through some other staff and they want to be put on the, the mailing list that we send out monthly. So, yeah.
To begin with, we only sent it to library staff, didn't we? And then it was extended to student services staff. But now there are some other staff also who are interested.
And when we have a specific subject like dramatic arts, we'll make a point of sending it out to our performing arts staff. Yeah, so it gives me a lot of satisfaction. Yep.
It looks like there's another question, David. Do you always connect to a local story in the newsletter?
When we can. There isn't always a story. But yeah, we want to make it relatable beyond our collections and resources, but activities and people around the campus. So yeah, we try to do that whenever we can.
Yeah, we try to find some kind of link, don't we? And sometimes it's more obvious than others. Yeah.
I think there's one last question there.
Audiences.
Yeah, which I think you sort of answered.
Yeah. So the audience really was initially librarians, wasn't it? So our library staff to explain the subject headings.
And when we expanded it to non-library, excuse me, staff, it was an opportunity to explain like keywords and subject headings, the difference from that. And when you're using the research bank, we could tell them at particular places to go to do particular searches. So it was an opportunity for a bit of user education.
So it started off as staff development, really, didn't it? And I guess it still is, but it's been expanded a bit from there as well. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Charlotte, we'll pass over to you now.
I'll just set up sharing my screen and turn on the presentation. Right, Joanne, is that displaying now?
Yep, that's displaying.
Excellent. Right, so this is a very short talk about how you can stay standards compliant with MARC and still get in all those extra bits your library needs. In other words, how to have your cake and eat it too. But I have to have my mouse in the right place. So, when you see the number 9 in a MARC tag, it immediately tells you that the data you're seeing is someone's local data. It might be yours, or it might be someone else's, but the presence of the 9 tells us we won't find a MARC instruction on what we see. There's one exception we'll talk about in a minute, but let's look at a few examples, some of which I'm hoping might be familiar to you. Anytime I see these fields in someone else's record I'm importing, I know it's completely safe for me to delete them. In fact, with many systems these days, you can set things up so that when you import the record, these fields magically disappear without any manual intervention. I might read them for interest, but they've been coded with 9s, so I know they probably aren't relevant to me. There is one field that uses the 9 which isn't quite as local as the others. The series statement field. So what's going on here? Well, the 490 is a transcription of the series statement as it appears on the copy being catalogued. So it could theoretically be slightly different on different printings. To be honest, I don't know why they chose to use the 9 in this field, but I do know that the choice was made long before anyone was likely to care about asking the question. The 490 tag seems to have been in use since at least the 1970s. But before 2009, it was only used on records where the form of the series statement on the book was different from the authorized form for the series. This implies that we're back to that same basic concept as the ones we've just been talking about. It's true for the copy in hand. I suspect, though, that it might just be that the 9 didn't have as much meaning when this field was established as it does now. Remember that MARC's been in a state of ongoing development over decades. And remember too that what we now casually refer to as MARC is actually MARC 21, which was compiled in 1999 from existing versions of MARC which had undergone separate development. So yes, this is inconsistent, but it's a legacy of an old system trying to keep up with constant change. What matters here is that this is the only 9 field that has specific MARC instructions and is likely to be just as significant to you as to the library who entered the data, so don't just delete this one. So ignoring the 490, when you look at a 9 field in the MARC manual, this is the kind of thing you'll see. It's valid for use, but it isn't really defined. You're free to make use of them in any way that's relevant to your library, and other libraries will understand that the content of the field is possibly not relevant to them. Nor does it have to be, because you've told them it's not theirs just by using that field with the 9 in it. Clever, isn't it? But don't get too excited just yet. Excuse me. While the 9 means that the data is local, and you won't find any reference to 9XX fields in the MARC bibliographic manual, not all of it is entered manually, and not all fields are completely safe for you to use. Some fields are system generated to reflect holdings or other exchange data. OCLC has a list of fields they've defined for use in their system. Other systems may also make use of various 9XX fields. For this reason, while you can safely delete these on import, you might want to be a little more cautious in choosing fields for adding data in your own system, in case you select one that's going to cause problems for someone else. Now, this isn't necessarily a comprehensive list. If your library is already using a 9 field and everything's working fine, there's no need to change anything. But if you're going to choose a new field to use, these ones are pretty safe as a starting point. The right place to start, though, is with what you're trying to accomplish, because that will determine how many fields you need. Remember that the more you have, the more complicated it becomes in terms of display and search indexing, and the more customizations will be required during any upgrade or change of system. For most purposes, picking just one field and sticking with it is probably a good idea. But regardless of whether you use 1 or 20 local fields, the most important thing you can do is write it down. Seriously, make sure you've recorded which fields you use and what gets recorded in them. You might know, but what if you win lotto and someone else has to take over? Or if there's a system change and someone other than you is responsible for making sure things work right? Oh, and do share this list with your IT support or whoever manages your database and the public view of your catalogue. They may need to configure things so that your records will save and index correctly and that the data displays to the public, or doesn't, as you intend. The list of why you might want to include 9 fields in your records is pretty much endless, but here are some common possibilities. You might serve a community of users who need specialised subject access, and there's just no thesaurus out there that quite meets your needs. You might want to include te reo Māori terms specifically relevant to the local tangata whenua, or better serve another language community. Moving on, you may have something specific to say about your copy of a particular title. Maybe Margaret Mahi personally signed your copy of The Lion in the Meadow. Or maybe you have a photo of your staff clustered around a visiting actor pinned into your copy of their biography. In both of these cases, this is information that's relevant to your users, and you need to make sure it's displaying to them. There are other situations where you need the information, but not necessarily to be seen by the public. For example, workflow status. Sure, most systems will let you have an on-order status, but you might want to make sure all your staff know there's been a delay on this one arriving. Or you might have a project ongoing and you need to be able to locate all the title records for that set. Or perhaps it's about regular tracking. It could be used as a way to keep track of the work completed by various staff, or of knowing how many titles were catalogued in a given month for reporting purposes. In the end, it doesn't matter what information you want to include in your records, there will be a place to put it. And when there's no defined place to put it, a 9 field can be your friend to ensure your records stay nicely standards compliant and you get what you need. The things to remember are 490s don't count as normal 9 fields for this purpose. They do have written instructions which need to be followed. All other 9 fields are open for consideration. Do you need them? Do you want them? What are they there for? Are they helping you? Or are they just getting in the way? If you're using 9 fields, make sure there's a record of why, what, and how. Which 9 field? How does it get filled in? Does it display to the public or not? And so on. And every so often, question why you're doing what you're doing. Is there a better way? Is there maybe now a new mark field or subfield that fits the need, which you can use? Be particularly wary of using 9s when the information in the field would be relevant to libraries other than just your own. And that is all I have to say about the 9s. Nice and short.
So, do we have any questions for Charlotte? Okay, well, thank you very much, Charlotte. That was another very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Anoushka is ready, so we'll pass over to Anoushka for her update on the National Library.
Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen. Hang on. Here we go. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Right, and you can hear me okay?
Yes, coming through fine.
Awesome, that's great. Wow, we're moving through pretty quickly this morning. Okay, so I'm Anoushka McGuire. I'm currently cataloguing team leader, cataloguing team leader at the National Library of New Zealand. I currently look after two of the cataloguing teams, both the monograph cataloguing teams, and I'm also a CATSIG committee member. So this is just going to be a short presentation. They are short updates. Mostly I'll be talking about our plans at the National Library for the RDA toolkit switchover and our implementation plans. I'll talk about some of the work that we've been doing on policy statements and our application profile. And then I'll briefly at the end talk about our official response to the not so recent program for cooperative cataloguing's options regarding the ISBD punctuation. Okay, so this is our draft timeline, and I would like to emphasise that this is very drafty because things have already shifted quite a lot over the last year. So this is our draft timeline for implementation at this time. So December 15th, 2020 is the date that the beta toolkit will switch to being the live RDA toolkit available at the Access RDA Toolkit.org URI. The current toolkit will still be available, and we will continue to use the current toolkit version for our work until sometime in 2021. So in April 2021 is where we're working towards having our draft policy statements ready for inclusion in the toolkit. We're hoping this will be around April, but will depend on the release schedule for the toolkit next year, which has not yet been confirmed. So in any case, we are working to be ready to go by then so that we're ready when the toolkit people are ready for us. And then in mid-2021, after our policy statements are in the toolkit, we will set a date for implementation that will give us time to train our cataloguers. Based on when we shift from AACR2 to RDA back in 2012, 2013, 12 weeks is probably our likely time frame. That gives us enough time to train everybody in-house while maintaining our usual cataloguing outputs. So implementation, all going well, could be for us July, August next year. So training, we'll be training intensively internally. And like when we went to RDA in 2013, we of course will make our training materials available freely as we did last time for anyone who's interested. We'll also next year plan to support the library community by supporting CATSIG and ORDAC to run events next year that explore the new RDA toolkit. And then just swapping hats, putting on my ORDAC hat. Remember, if you were in the update I shared it in the first webinar, ORDAC, which is the Oceania RDA Committee, of which CATSIG is represented on by me and Chris Todd, we are planning to survey the Oceania community in early February next year to find out what you all want in terms of training and events and support next year through these changes to the RDA toolkit. So just a plea, so when that survey comes out early next year, please just reply and tell us everything that you want, and that will help with planning events and training next year. Okay, so before we implement at the National Library, what we need to have in place is the RDA toolkit, which says what can be done. It says this is the element you can use to record the extent of a manifestation. So the RDA toolkit will be live, as I said, on December 15th this year. So that's in place, or that will be in place. And then we need policy statements, and a policy statement will say whether the National Library applies or does not apply the options on an element page. There is documentation that we need to have in place. The documentation in the toolkit will explain in detail how we would record the data within our specific context, which at the moment is encoding in MARC and using the ULMA library management platform. Finally, the application profile is the kind of high-level documentation that says what the National Library of New Zealand considers to be our core elements, or which elements are mandatory or not mandatory in our description. So it's like an overview of what to expect in our metadata. These can be quite detailed and convoluted, but there are already human readable application profiles in use now by our community, and a good one to go and look at is the BibCo standard record RDA metadata application profile, and it's human readable, it's a Word document, and it basically just steps through all the elements and whether an element is required or not required in order to comply with PCC guidelines for BibCo records. It's just yeah. Okay, sorry. Right, so this is what the policy statements look like in the new toolkit. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the beta toolkit since the September release, but there are many more policy statements there at the moment. So British Library and Library of Congress and the PCC have been working really hard to get their policy statements sorted. So I'm just showing you this slide. So you can see there's the option, and then the British Library policy statement is to apply unless unduly onerous. So just picture that when the National Library of New Zealand has our policy statements in the toolkit, you will be able to see an NLNZ at this option and all the options on the page. So the work we're doing, we've had to take, because we don't have policy statements in the current toolkit in the same way that LCPCC and the British Library have, which is at point of RDA instruction. You can see a little button and you can click to see what the policy statement is. We've never had that. We have our current policy split into 3 documents: our agent and series policy, our attributes policy, and our relationships policy. So in order to get from this state of affairs to the new toolkit, where you can see the policy statements are very atomized and linked to specific options, we had to audit and consolidate all the policy in these 3 documents. We had to audit all our other documentation to find policy that had been recorded in other places, and then we had to bring it all together and sort it out by elements. So our current work now is working through all the current policy that we have, starting with manifestation and all the elements related to manifestation. Then when we've done all our current policy and mapped that across into the new beta toolkit, then we'll go back to the beginning and make sure we've covered all the other elements and options. And then we have to work through all the options that are on the guidance pages and on the entity pages. So it's quite a massive piece of work. Don't try and read it. It's just to give you a quick snapshot of how we're managing this work. This is our working document for our policy statement work. It's a huge spreadsheet, but luckily we didn't create it from scratch. We are lucky enough to have a lot of contacts with colleagues around the world, and this spreadsheet is based on a spreadsheet supplied by the British Library. So they did all the hard work mapping out all the options and the URIs for the options. There are 3,006 elements in the new toolkit, each of which have multiple options, and each of these will need a policy statement. So we've organised our work by entity, so each tab on the spreadsheet is an entity, and then on that sheet are all the elements related to that entity, and then all the options related to each element on a separate line. And then we have columns for admin and, you know, who's working on an element and whether it's ready to be reviewed by the group. And a stat sheet so that we can track how we're going, which at the moment is slowly, but we're making progress. Okay, so the next, so this is our current supporting documentation in the toolkit. I don't know how many people are familiar with these. What these do are they're maps that bring together everything we might need to know about a particular format or type of resource, just in order to make our workflows easier. And this is where those same kinds of documents are going to live in the new toolkit. So we're still going to have that layer of supporting documentation that will show, which will allow our cataloguers to easily navigate the elements that they need when they are describing a particular type of resource. We are parking this work though until we are all the way through the policy statements. We want to finish the policy statements first and then have a really good look at what kind of documentation we need in order to support our workflows. We're also parking the application profile until the end, or at least until we're much further on in the policy statement work, so we can kind of get a better sense of how we might format our application profile in a way that is useful both to us and to other people. So before I leave RDA, I just want to do a quick plug. There's a lot of free training resources available at the moment. So I just want to plug the RDA Toolkit YouTube channel because it's very handy and it's got lots of, they're always adding new presentations that members of the RSC are doing at various places and times. But also there's this new RDA concept series, which are just little short videos that go over core concepts from the RDA beta and just little bite-sized, well-explained videos. So that's a really good place to start if you want to start to get familiar with the beta site. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about quickly is the PCC guidelines for minimally punctuated marked bibliographic records, which came into force, I think it was in January of this year, which is quite some time ago now. And yes, I just wanted to say, you know, our official position on the PCC guidelines is, because we have been asked a couple of times by people, is that we do not, at the National Library, we do not plan to follow the PCC guidelines for minimally punctuated marked bibliographic records at this time, mainly because we aren't actually PCC participants. So, and also, as you can see, we have a lot of work to do with RDA, and that is taking up all of our energy and headspace. Some of the thinking we do later on, after we've kind of made our RDA policy statements, we'll be doing thinking around how we record that data in our MARC records, and that may lead us to discussions about what punctuation we continue to record and what we might drop. But that's something we're going to discuss once we are at that stage. In the meantime, we will continue to create our MARC bibliographic records with full ISBD punctuation. And that is the end of my quick talk. Are there any questions? Oh, actually, so I'm quite happy for people to email me directly, or there is also the NatBib email box, the New Zealand National Bibliography, nznb@dia.gov.nz, which is a kind of a catch-all email box for any questions about our metadata at the National Library, or any questions for the cataloguing teams here. Okay, so are there any questions? Claire, if you just go to the PCC page on the Library of Congress website, Library of Congress has a page for all the PCC programs. But I can take if I share my screen, I can probably take it back. Or I could just go through it again. Yep, there's the address.
Okay. Looks like all the questions so far.
And I'll stress again, I mean, any questions, just get in touch. I'm really happy, and we're really happy to share anything that we do.
Well, thank you very much, Anoushka. That was a great update. So now at least we've got a bit of an idea of what's going on with everything. So we've got our next session next Thursday on cataloguing rare material by Nina. So I hope you will all come along and join us then. And I just want to say again, thank you very much to all our presenters. We really appreciated the time you've taken to present the information to us. Yes, unfortunately, you feel like you want to be able to give a clap, and easiest things to do. But so as we can see, there's people clapping anyway. That's good. So under reactions. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and I hope to see a lot of you again next week.